and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is Cyrus, and on tonight's video we're going to take a look at this article by the Sydney Morning Herald, and it's titled John Cleese's Next Act. Quote, "I think there is life after death." So basically it takes somebody with guts like the legendary actor John Cleese, known for works like Monty Python and Faulty Towers and lots of other amazing programming, to have the guts to stand up for what we talk about on this channel, and how I think he is a lot more afterlife red-pilled than even what this article says about him. Before we go further, this is Afterlife Topics, where, this is the type of stuff we talk about. If you go down and hit that subscribe button, punch a like, share this video, it helps keep this information out there. You can also come in as a patron, patreon.com/Afterlife Topics, or donate at the PayPal. The link is down below. Okay, so to continue. John Cleese's next act. At 80, it is perhaps understandable that comedy legend John Cleese has begun to turn his mind to what's coming around the bend sooner or later. And it is true that for a lot of people, it takes until they're in their 60s, 70s, or 80s to begin thinking about this subject. That was never the case for me, just because my personality is all about long-term planning. So I think, why wait until I'm elderly to begin concerning myself with what happens next? Why not plan for this well in advance? But that's just my philosophy. Cleese continues, "My private project, which I haven't told anyone about, is I think there is life after death. I don't know anything in detail, but I've seen enough evidence that something goes on, certainly for some people, after they die. I don't think it's for some people. I think that this would be a constant that applies to everybody." But he is taking a kind of a safe, skeptical route, which I think is also appropriate. And also, it makes sense given sort of what we call healthy British skepticism, and it appeals much more to people to kind of come at things from the sideline. Not everybody wants to go balls to the wall like on this channel and be able to accept a lot of the more shall we say wild elements of this field. But kind of hanging out in the sidelines is a good place to go, especially if you want to be influential. So this is a part that I think is pretty important. He cites the writings of Bruce Grayson, professor emeritus at the University of Virginia, and an expert in the field of near-death experiences, as a major influence on his views. Again, it's really great that here's somebody who is checking out the objective evidence, and that is, again, it's the best place to start. Yes, maybe I'm a little bit more red-pilled than Mr. Cleese is, but I started off this way also. On the periphery, looking at the data, looking at the near-death experience researchers, and looking at things from that angle. And it wouldn't be until many years later that I would begin having my own personal experiences that did take this subject up to the next level. Cleese continues, "Once you start reading about that, you begin to realize it may be that consciousness is not produced by the brain," he says. "The brain is like a transmitter. It picks stuff up like a television set. The program's not made inside the set. You see what I mean? If you think the brain might operate more like that, it explains a lot of things that ordinary science can't explain." Again, it's great to have somebody who's a very influential figure in the UK, known for his wit, sarcasm, but also, I think, level-headedness, showing that this is the level-headed approach to the subject. Materialism is not level-headed. Being a skeptic means being a skeptic of the status quo, being a skeptic of the materialists. And the transmission theory is an excellent place to start. I don't think it explains everything, but it is the hypothesis upheld by a lot of these researchers like Bruce Grayson. And the idea being what we all kind of know, which is that the brain is not you. It's not the consciousness equals meat, but the brain is working with consciousness. And that is kind of like Afterlife 101. He continues, I would like to do a TV series trying to get people to open up to the idea of a life after death. Nothing to do with religion at all, purely to do with science, because I think if people feel that something goes on after death, it makes life itself more meaningful. Well, Mr. Cleese, if you would like to come on this show, if you would like me to be part of that show, I'm here. I'm a bachelor. I'm able to travel and go anywhere so long as the quarantines allow me to travel to those places. And so I'd be happy to work with you on that. I just hope that my material isn't a little bit too out there for the kind of fence sitting position, which I do greatly respect the fence sitting position, but I also have to be realistic that it's difficult sometimes to marry those two areas. So, for example, on this channel, you may notice that I don't typically get guests who are on the fence sitting periphery. For example, it wouldn't make a lot of sense if I had Bruce Grayson on this show, because while the research is amazing and what he has to say, and if you watch him on YouTube, it's really great stuff. But if we look at this topic only from the angle of near-death experiences, then in my opinion, we don't get the full picture. We have to combine a lot of different areas. Probably it's why Victor Zamet's work was the most influential for me, because Zamet did that, combined 30, 40 different areas of evidence, and then essentially found the commonalities and found how it all links together for a much bigger perspective about what really happens when you cross over. Going at this only from near-death experiences, only from that peripheral vantage point, which is a little bit more appealing on a mainstream level, but quite limited, it tends to produce problems later on. NDEs don't explain everything, or even half of everything, or even a fraction of everything. NDEs have a lot of holes. It's difficult to put those pieces together. Certain individual NDEs, I think, can be very illuminating about an afterlife and very, very consistent with everything else. But then you get NDEs where it's like weird, crazy, religious, fundamentalist stuff, and a lot of things that just don't really make a lot of sense. And sometimes it sends people who are strictly in the NDE realm for a bit of a tailspin, because it's difficult to make sense of how those fit together, and then you'll get theories coming out that there's an afterlife, but everything we see in the NDE is some kind of a big illusion or some kind of big lie. And that's where I think people can get really confused. Like, we had the one guy, Anthony Peake, who I've had a debate with before on the internet. Some people remember this from last year. But that's kind of a good example, coming at this squarely from the NDE angle, and it's almost as if he began to distrust NDEs and concocted this much more elaborate idea involving deja vu and having to relive your life again and again, and this sort of like very impersonal process to the concept of an afterlife, removing the essential components of there actually being an afterlife where we meet deceased loved ones, we go into other worlds, and sort of backtracking and morphing it into something else. And I still respect people who are coming to that position because they don't really know any other way to look at it. But if you just come at this from that only that one angle, then it can lead to people getting quite confused. But anyway, this doesn't really have to do with John Cleese. I sort of just wanted to put that out there to make a couple of points about that. The big picture is that despite the issues with NDEs, this is how to get the afterlife topic out there among normies, and how to get that paradigm to change. You need influential people like Cleese to come in and be advocates for the material, to show that this is actually what it means to be connected to, shall we say, rationalism. Somebody like Cleese is a figurehead of cynical, snarky British humor, and that is certainly has a relationship to British rationalism, British level-headedness, and there needs to be people to show that that is the path. It is rational, it is level-headed to look at very obvious, very real phenomena and divorce it from mainstream materialism, which is getting a lot wrong, and it's very difficult to move forward on a scientific level with mainstream materialism. So even though NDEs by themselves are a little bit limited, that is the path, because there is no other place where modern medicine and science is so interconnected with the afterlife subject as with NDEs. And ultimately, it's through NDEs that we will see so many changes and perspectives about this. And it's also why afterlife education is important, because learning about the subject, again, solely through NDEs, after a while you do begin to hit that wall, and it's difficult to move forward unless you begin incorporating out-of-body experiences, the after-death contacts, and electronic contacts, and elements of mediumship, physical mediumship, direct voice mediumship, and many, many more subjects. Of course, I talk about this in the books and many other videos on this channel. So I just want to toss it out there. Again, this is the Sydney Morning Herald, John Cleese, the great, legendary John Cleese, now 80 years old. I hope he'll be with us another 10 or 20 years on this mortal coil. He's still out there, still performing and doing stand-up, which is great. So one last thing on this article. So this article kind of diverges into the political, which I don't want to get into. But he makes a point toward the end, which I think could apply also to his points about life after death. The trouble, he says, is with the narrowing of public discourse. If you dare express a view outside a narrow ideological orthodoxy, they'll label you a fascist. And of course, he's talking about the insane culture war that's happening all over the world, which actually I do quite agree with his points about this also. He goes on talking about woke people, and again, he's being a voice of reason, not just with the esoteric, but with the political. But I don't want to go there too much. But I think he's also making a point to a sense about life after death, in the sense that if you go against the narrow public discourse. So then the narrow public discourse for a very long time about this matter has been materialism. So even if you have very respected researchers talking about NDEs, researching them and demonstrating that there is much more to the subject than some half-baked theory that you see the lights of the operating theater, or it's oxygen deprivation causing a sensation of a tunnel, like all these really half-baked theories. But if you go against that public discourse, then it is heresy if you're involved in mainstream medical or scientific practices. And that's the way forward out of the miasma of darkness in this world. Is we have to not to be use NDE terminology, follow the light at the end of the tunnel and get out of the public discourse, and people being brave enough to add an inch. If everybody just has to add an inch to resisting public discourse, and then we'll get there eventually. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is Afterlife Topics. You can, of course, get involved at the Facebook group Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. You can, for example, if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to this channel or check out the Reddit page or afterlifetopics.com. You can grab books like Understanding Life After Death or the Afterlife and Beyond, where I go into more detail about all these subjects and where we go when we cross over, what the other side is like, and what to expect once you're over there. So that's about it for this video, and hopefully I'll see you guys real soon.